What is going on, FA Nation? Welcome back. This is the Fantasy Alarm NASCAR DFS podcast, and I am Dan Malin, and I am joined, as always, by our FSWA three-time NASCAR Writer of the Year. He is Matt Selz, and Matt, it is the penultimate race for the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series season. We are at Martinsville, a pair of back-to-back short, flat tracks over the next couple of weeks as we finish up the season. But we are coming off like another great race at Homestead. It always delivers. We had a great finish. What were your thoughts about last week's race and some of the, I guess, the news that has kind of broke this week, but we still have some rumors about drivers and their 2025 plans.
Yeah, I thought it was an excellent race. Maybe the best start to finish race at Homestead that we've seen that's a non-championship race. Obviously, there are some championship races that are fantastic. I thought it was outstanding. That pass to win the race by Tyler Reddick was unbelievable. Blaney, I saw a report today that said Blaney is still regretting letting him get to the top, which I'm not sure he would have held them off anyway. I think Reddick had the run that he could have just done a crossover and moved down and driven past him. I mean, he put together a final lap that was 0.6 faster than anybody on the track, and I think the third fastest lap of the race, period. So not a lot you're going to do there.
Checkers or records, man.
I mean, it was unbelievable. Suarez looked good for a time there. Late we could have had a non-playoff guy win that race. But then there's also the fact that issues still befall playoff drivers. Every week, there's like half the playoff drivers have some sort of issue, and whatnot. It seemed like Larson for a time got stuck mid-pack, couldn't move up, couldn't pass people. Chase Elliott looked good, and then he kind of, trailed off towards the end there. It was a fantastic, fantastic race. I didn't really like what I saw out of the was it the truck race where the guy got wrecked intentionally and then truck caught fire.
I try not to be selfish.
For like 3 days.
Yeah, so Matt Mills was the one that was wrecked, and I actually put him in my playbook, and I was actually very excited about him from a DFS perspective. And I rarely write up Matt Mills, but he got a significant crew chief upgrade for that race for the last 3 races of the year. And I'm like, maybe because it was Cole Custer's former Xfinity and Cup Series crew chief when, he won a previous Xfinity Series championship, went to the Cup Series. So this guy has been around, and I'm like, this guy can only help this team that is typically like a smaller team. Sure, they can field 4 trucks. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe we can feel pretty good about Matt Mills. And man, Connor Jones suspended for this week's race at Martinsville. Johnny Sauter is in the 66 truck. He will be in the Truck Series playbook for this weekend. But Connor Jones, rightfully so, suspended for the race. Matt Mills, luckily, I believe he's out of the hospital. He was on the entry list for Martinsville. Also, in this day and age of AI, Connor Jones has to be a little more aware that anyone can figure out that your apology was not written by yourself. It was pretty clear. I think a few people debunked that he used an AI generator to craft his own apology in what he did to Matt Mills. It's clear that he intentionally wrecked him. His radio commentary was not necessarily in his favor either. There's no way around it. You intentionally wrecked a guy. He went into the wall hard. His truck caught fire. He had to spend 3 days in the hospital. And on top of that, he hasn't really done much in terms of generating good results. So I don't really see how or why ThorSport even brings him back. But it's a conversation for another day because this is a Cup Series podcast.
Yeah. I did see there's rumors that John Hunter Nemechek is out of a ride.
Saw that.
For 2025. I haven't seen them substantiated, but the Twitter account that I saw leak it was correct on 2 or 3 other drivers earlier this season.
Mm-hmm.
So I am curious as to what
Ryan Preece is definitely going to RFK next year, right?
I think the cat's out of the bag on that. I think Brad Keselowski's trying to be very coy as to how he describes if they got a third chart, but the math doesn't work that everybody knows all of the charters are accounted for.
Yep.
And everybody knows where all but one of the charters wound up. And everybody knows that this other team that won't tell you that they got one has wanted one for a while. And yet there's one mysteriously floating out there. And yeah, it doesn't like it's happening. I don't know why Brad doesn't want to talk about it at this point, other than like, I mean, it's not like they're still in the championship. Maybe they are in the owners. To be honest, I don't keep track of the owners' points. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that Priest is going to RFK. They've done well enough that they could support a third team for sure. Ryan Priest fits their mold of driver.
Yeah.
The guy who keeps his head down, gets results, keeps plowing forward.
Honestly, like, and I like guys that, swallow their pride, and they will kind of just do that thing where it's like, I can't be a full-time driver, but give me some time in a simulator. I'll work in the shop. We see this all the time in the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series. Like, if you can't give me a full-time opportunity, at least let me like work in your garage. Give me a handful of races every year. Just let me prove myself. Saw that with Ty Majeski. Josh Berry had a similar trajectory.
He was a reserve driver basically, and then got used as a reserve for a different team.
Parker Kligerman drove the 75 truck for Henderson Motorsports, and they only have like 7 full-time employees, and he parlayed that because he won a Truck Series race as a part-time driver, but he parlayed that into a full-time opportunity for 2 years in the Xfinity Series with Big Machine Racing. So it's like, I like it. I like those guys that do take a chance on themselves. Like, sure, they lose a Cup Series ride, but even John Hunter Nemechek, a couple of years ago, we saw him go from the Cup Series down to the Truck Series. Then he went up to the Xfinity Series, got some wins under his belt, and earned a Cup Series ride. What he does in 2025, I don't really know.
Yeah, my cat's being annoying tonight. I don't know.
Oh, that's fine. Like, it's Halloween Eve, like,
Yeah, she is kind of a blackish cat. I mean, she's
let the cat run wild.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so we'll see where John Hunter winds up. I'm guessing he's going to go back down to the Xfinity Series. I would assume he's been so far in his time in Cup, 2 different stints. So, we'll see there. I don't remember. Oh, Harrison Burton's going back down to the Xfinity Series, I believe,
with AM Racing.
Yes. So
good driver, bad equipment.
Yeah, we'll see. Still some stuff to sort out. Also, the lawsuit with 2311. It's going to be hilarious when Tyler Reddick wins the championship and then NASCAR has to hand 2311 the title race while being federally sued.
That'd be awesome.
But yeah, with that, what race we got this week?
Martinsville.
About Martinsville, the paperclip. And unfortunately, we can no longer see Ross Chastain's phenomenal move. That's unfortunate. I mean, I get it. Safety things, right? Let them try, though. If somebody wants to impale themselves on a gate, why? Like why not? I mean, I guess it's bad television. But either way.
Still one of the coolest things you'll ever see.
Yes. Tempers are usually very high by like lap 450 out of the 500 here.
Yeah, because I think at that point, like, like if you don't have the track position, like, and you're like kind of stuck, like, and you're between like 15th and 20th, it's like you don't really have that Hail Mary that you can necessarily pull out.
Yeah.
To try and gain track position. Like, I love Martinsville, great track. The short track package has been terrible in this car.
It has been terrible.
It's bad. Which unfortunately leads me to believe like we could have 2 really crappy races this weekend, next weekend.
That's probably true.
But either way, great track, fun track. I would love to go one day and get a Martinsville hot dog. But yeah, 500 laps. So this is definitely one of those races where, the last couple of weeks, you've always texted me as soon as prices drop for DraftKings. And again, we have 6 drivers that are priced over $10K. And if you're paying for 1, 2, it's going to be hard to fit 3 of these guys in your lineup. But you basically pay for these drivers, not for necessarily PD, but you need dominator points out of these guys.
That's true. Now, Would it shock you to know that the last time a driver won here starting inside the top 5 was 5 races ago?
Um,
In fact, the last time a driver to win started inside the top
Byron.
10 was Byron in 2022 in August of 2022.
That doesn't necessarily surprise me, but at the same time, I still kind of stand my ground on the fact that like if you're gonna pay
Yes.
a 10K price tag, like there's there's 500 laps, which means we're going to have, when we account for cautions and in those laps, you still have like 300 dominator points
Yep.
available in this race, and so like they will be spread out. I don't think we're going to see what Kyle Larson did at Bristol. Sorry, where he spanked the field essentially and nearly put up 200 points on
Yeah.
DraftKings. Like, I think we could easily see one driver lead between 200 to 250 laps, another between 100 and 150, and then you're going to get like a tertiary dominator and like other drivers to lead a handful of laps. That's just going to happen with like pit cycle, guys hoping that a caution comes out that maybe helps them gain track position. So yeah, like I still try to just set it in my mind that if I'm gonna pay up for a driver or two of these guys, I want to nail the two primary dominators, and those guys I hope one of them either wins or both finish top 5, and the dominator points can just get them to the optimal lineup.
Yeah. Now I will say this race earlier this year had not a single driver lead more than 90 laps.
Okay, I look like a fool.
This race last year, this exact race last year, had 2 drivers top 145 laps.
Okay.
And then you had a couple, like you had Blaney who won it, lead 145. Almirola finished second, 66 laps. Hamlin finished third with 156 led. And then you had Chase Elliott started 14th, finished 17th, and led 83 laps in between. And Truex started on the pole, finished 12th, and led 47 laps. So, those two races kind of a little different from each other in terms of, how many laps we saw led. The spring race here last year also had 2 drivers top 100 laps led, and then the rest of them were kind of well spread out, although that was only a 400 lap. So that's a little different since 100 fewer laps. If you go back to this race 2 years ago in 2022, Hamlin led 203 laps before finishing 5th. Bell started 20th, won the race, and led 150. So generally speaking, I'd be fine with building off of 2 primary dominators. And then if you have a third guy who leads, I don't know, 60 to 80 laps, then you're pretty well set. But if you do miss on, if somebody flat out dominates and let's say leads between 150 and 200 laps, and you don't have them in the lineup, it's going to be pretty hard to make up those points. So laps led dominators here are quite important at Martinsville.
In terms of comparable tracks that we can look at, they would be New Hampshire. Would you consider North Wilkesboro or no? Because one, for the Cup Series at least,
it's an all-star race, so I don't like. It's half a field. It's a shorter distance. It's a gimmick, set up where they inverted the field one year halfway through, and whatever else. I will say, if you want to look at one other one that's interesting, is
Iowa
Wide Technologies Raceway, Gateway.
Okay,
because it's still not ideal. It's larger than New Hampshire because it's longer than a mile, but it is flat. And it does have relatively long straightaways and tight corners, which is what Martinsville, proportionally, the straightaways are very long in Martinsville, and it's very tight corners. So, in that way, New Hampshire doesn't even fully fit because it feels like you're turning at New Hampshire for a very long time. They're relatively wide, flat corners. But
Is that kind of the same thing with Iowa?
Yeah, you may, if you're going to look at Iowa, then I may as well toss in Richmond, because I feel like Iowa's closer to Richmond than it is. Iowa's not exactly flat; it's got decent banking to it for a short track. So, and then Phoenix isn't even the best. Isn't a great one either.
Yeah, Phoenix is
Weird.
just the configuration with the dog leg and everything. It's a weird track. They can fan out so wide.
And then there is some decent bank in that set of corners. In Phoenix, it's like 12 degrees. Martinsville will tell you it gets to 12 degrees, but that's only if you're standing like on the outer fence.
Yeah.
Where you're actually turning is very flat. So that's what I would look for. Previous Martinsville races.
Specifically next gen era.
Yeah. Because you could actually move and pass and bump people in the previous. Not so much in the next gen era. So I will go ahead and we'll diving in to
share screen
driver pool here. I had a weird thing pop up. That's what took me so long. There was like asked me something it's never asked me before. So how about that? So yeah, when I texted you earlier. There's 6 drivers over 10-3 on DK.
Yep.
So we got to get real choosy with who we're going after, because there's no way you're fitting more than 2 of these guys in a single lineup unless you are just playing John Leckie, Kaz Gralla, and Daniel Hemmer.
Yeah, so
what you're gonna do, so don't even think about it.
It's funny because I submitted my article. I do a preview every week for another website, Fantrax, and 5 of the 6 drivers that I previewed are over 10K, and so now it's like we really need to weed these out. Hard not to like Hamlin.
Correct.
Joe Gibbs, obviously this is he'll get booed regardless of whatever track he goes to, but this is a track that he likes. It's one that he considers a bit of a home track for him.
Correct.
He's won here in the past.
He hasn't won in the last 5, but he's been 6th, 4th, and 3rd in 3 of them.
Yeah. And he's led laps.
Most. Yeah. I was going to say, he averages the most laps led per race.
In the spring, he led 66. A year ago in this race, he led 156. Spring of 2023, led 36, finished 4th. 2 years ago in this race, he led over 200 laps. And in all of these 4 races that I'm talking about, he had a driver rating of at least 109. Top 5 equity, dominator equity. It's hard not to like what we're seeing. And this is also Joe Gibbs Racing. Like they are just one of the better teams on these short flat tracks.
Correct. And he also needs the win, basically. I mean, if we want to talk about playoff standings here for a minute, Tyler Reddick and Logano are locked in, right? Yep. They've both won in this round. They are locked in. Does not matter what happens at Martinsville. Not saying they won't want to win and then make their competitors point in, but they can simply just go log 500 laps for fun that day.
Question.
Yes.
And no, I'm kind of with you because I don't really have much interest in Logano or Reddick for this race, but we do have a mile flat track next weekend. What can they possibly take away from Martinsville, or maybe could they possibly find something here that could help them for Phoenix next weekend?
Maybe a little. I don't know that the 2 are similar enough that the same setup would work at both. Maybe something with the brakes. Brakes tend to be a little bit important in Phoenix, especially in hot temps and whatnot. So maybe brake setup, but I don't know that they're comparable enough that they're going to really learn that they're setting up for Martinsville in the same way they set up for Phoenix.
Got it.
Yeah, I would say Christopher Bell in 3rd is reasonably safe. He's 29 points above the cut line. Byron is only 7 points to the good, so he's going to need a really strong finish. Stage points, perhaps the win to lock in. Larson is on the outside, 7 points down. Hamlin is 18 points down. And then Blaney and Chase Elliott are going to need wins. Either that,
Oh
or
God,
they
Blaney was so close to winning last week, and now
yeah,
it's do or die for him this week.
right. Either that, or they need to both finish first and second in the first two stages, and then have hell befall their rivals in Byron and Larson and Hamlin. And then at that point, it's pretty likely only one of those two dudes is making it, unless somehow Christopher Bell just has an absolutely terrible day.
Is there any kind of like manufacturer note between like Wood Brothers, SHR, even Front Row, like do whatever you can to help Ryan Blaney in this instance?
It's possible that they're using those cars as a way to check on setups and try different things in practice that may help. Um, but then again, each driver drives so differently that sometimes, um, only they can make it go fast in that setup. I remember Brad Keselowski said something like this when he was at Penske, that he and Logano have their cars set up so differently that they each get speed with it, that if you swap them, they would be slow as dirt in each other's car because their driving style is so different
Hmm.
that even if they copied setup, it would slow them down because they'd have to think about what they're doing to go find the speed rather than just finding speed.
Got it.
So it's possible. I'm not saying that that's the case for everybody. I don't know enough about the the specific technical ways that Ryan Blaney drives each track, but I would assume that they are using Austin Cindric and Joey Logano setups to see if they can find speed for Blaney to help him. That's a pretty decent chance that that's happening.
Okay.
Hendrick's in a little bit of a different boat because right now only one of their three guys is in, and if one who's out gets in, it's going to knock the other guy out. So, so they're in a little bit of a tightrope situation where I feel like they have to just make a decision as to who they're backing.
It's got to be Larson and Byron.
I mean, I think they've I don't think Chase.
Like, I understand Chase is the golden boy. And I'm looking at his driver averages right now. And at Martinsville, he's very good.
He is very good.
64 laps led in the spring. He finished third. 83 laps led last year in this race 2 years ago. And we talk about how good Danny Hamlin was in this race 2 years ago. And that was also the race where he got bumped out of the championship race because of the move by Ross Chastain. But in that race, Elliott started P2 on the front row, led 54 laps, finished second in the first two stages. In the spring of that year, first race at Martinsville with the next gen car, 185 laps led. We saw him lead 3 years ago with the old car, 289 laps. I think that was the season he won the championship. We go back 4 years ago to the playoff race in Martinsville. He led 236 laps, and he won that race. Actually, no, 2020 was the year that he won the series championship.
Correct.
2021 was Larson's year. So he's had good runs here. It does feel a little odd because he needs a home run and he needs to win. But man, he looked good at Homestead last week. He got out front. I think he led 80 plus laps at Homestead. Had a good showing there.
Yeah, that's the fastest he's looked arguably all season.
Yeah. So can't necessarily write him off because he's shown 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in his career to go out and lead 80 plus laps here. And, he 10.5 isn't an awful price tag for him.
Correct. If he shows up with the speed he had at Homestead, it doesn't necessarily translate to Martinsville. And he can be a guy that goes out and just clicks off lap after lap. That's not a terrible price. I do like Hamlin and Blaney the most.
Okay.
In this price tag. range in terms of like their history here and domination and whatnot. I mean, if you look back over the last 5 races, the best average finish here is Ryan Blaney at 4.0.
And he won Iowa.
He did win Iowa. His worst finish in the next gen era here is 7th.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 4th, 3rd, 7th, 1st, 5th. He's pretty decent on the laps led. He's averaging 30 laps led a race, which puts him, sixth in the field. Denny doesn't quite have the average finish.
Yep.
But he does lead an awful lot of laps here. He needs it about as much as Ryan Blaney does. But those would be my top 2 guys
Okay.
in this range. And then I'd probably say Byron would be next. He's got a couple of wins here. We talked about the risk here with Byron is that if he doesn't win, he doesn't do you any good. In the next gen era, he's got 2 wins. However, he also has an 8th, a 23rd, and a 13th. The 8th, he started 25th, so there's at least PD there, right? But the 23rd, he started 8th, so that undoes the previous races PD. And then when he finished 13th, he started 16th, so he didn't, do a whole lot. And if he's at this price tag, you need him to be winning and you need him to be leading laps. He's averaged 60 laps led a race here over those 5 races. That's not bad. However, the average finish is a little sketchy for a guy who's, in the 10-8 range.
Got it. I do want to briefly mention Christopher Bell. Because again, he's a Joe Gibbs Racing driver.
Correct.
When we think about the 2022 Martinsville race, everyone's going to recall the move that Ross Chastain made, and that swept the headlines. But people are going to forget Christopher Bell won that race with 150 laps led. And not just that, but with 10 laps to go, he was sitting 3rd, and Chase Briscoe and Brad Keselowski were both in front of him. So with 10 laps to go, he didn't have the luxury of throwing his car into the wall and just going wide open around the track to cross the finish line and pass 2 drivers. No, he put his car in the right position, raced hard on a short track, passed 2 guys in 10 laps to get the win, and he advanced to Phoenix. And you made the comparison earlier in this podcast that we can draw some comparisons to New Hampshire just in terms of just being overall flat track.
Correct.
New Hampshire is a mile long. Martinsville's only
been ridiculous there.
He spanks the field at New Hampshire.
I think it's 4 straight wins across all series for Seabell at New Hampshire.
He won this year with 149 laps led, and he won 2 years ago with 42 laps led. And in the Xfinity series, he pretty much was a lock to win.
In the Xfinity series.
He was pretty much. It's like AJ Allmendinger at the Roval in the Xfinity series. Like it's just that good.
I think it's 4 straight wins in Xfinity in New Hampshire for him.
So it's weird, but it's like there are so many strong arguments you can make for anybody priced over 10K. But I'm strangely drawn to, you're on Hamlin and I think you said Blaney. I'm on Hamlin and to an extent I'm really on Bell, who is, he's raced for the championship the last 2 years. It hasn't come to fruition. We don't necessarily associate Bell with being among this elite tier of drivers, even though he is priced that way. But he is a guy that is good in the standings. Like he's in a comfortable spot, but he can absolutely lead 200 laps and win this race.
Yeah, I would think he might be the sneaky one over 10K if there is a sneaky guy over 10K.
Which is odd because he won this race 2 years ago. We're talking about him as a sneaky contrarian play.
Yeah. So we go a little further down. Logano's interesting to me only in the fact that he ranks 2nd in average finish here behind his teammate Blaney in the last 5 races at 4.4.
Yeah.
I don't know what the motivation is to race for, a race win. Like obviously he wants to do as best as he can, but he's locked in. The points don't really matter aside from probably ownership standings. But again, I don't know where he stands in that. The only reason I keep bringing that up is because that's where a bulk of the money comes from, is how you finish in the owners. Like if you win the owners championship, it's worth like 10 times as much money as the drivers.
Okay.
Title.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's worth an absurd amount more money. I don't know if it's fully 10 times, but it's like multiples of. And so that's why like when Logano didn't get through originally at the Roval and he said, well, we're still in the owners, that's fine because that's where the money is.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he was alluding to. Now he's got some ground to make up apparently according to NASCAR's owner standings. C. Bell is number 1, 22 points ahead of Byron, 24 points ahead of Larson. Then it's 39 over Reddick, 40 over Hamlin, 60 over Blaney, and 62 over Logano. So those are scored basically the same way as like the old school point standings were scored. So that could matter for Logano, but again, like he's a solid play because he finishes well here. But I don't know where the motivation comes from for him to like purely go out and dominate.
I gotta say, I'm actually really surprised that Chase Briscoe was 8,500. He was 7,500 for Homestead.
Yeah, and he had an okay day. Like he basically just did laps for 267 laps.
Because he was also a driver that I included in my Fantrax article, mostly because of like how he was in contention to win this race 2 years ago, but Christopher Bell put on a masterclass of how to race at this kind of track.
Yep.
And we forget about it because of Ross Chastain. But in 5 next-gen races, Briscoe has 5 top 10s and a pair of top 5s. And he led.
He finished 10th here earlier this year in the Cookout 400. Started 5th, had 24 fastest laps and 8 laps led. He was $7,500.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty decent price jump from earlier this year here.
Nobody's going to want to play him at 8,500. He's routinely been a 7K driver, sometimes a 6K driver this year.
Yeah, but the argument remains that if he does what he did in the spring, he's still worth 5x value.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, he put up 42 points. He started 5th, finished 10th, 24 fastest laps, 8 laps led, put up 42 DK points. That's basically 5x value. A little smidge below 5x at 8,500.
It's tough because there are some drivers that are cheaper than him that give me some intrigue.
Correct. But he is certainly in play. And if we're looking at a sneaky guy who may not get a lot of attention because it is a pretty decent price bump.
Can I guess?
Guess what?
Oh, are you just talking about Chase Briscoe still?
I'm just talking about he's in play.
Sorry, I thought you were pivoting to another driver, and I'm like,
sorry. But you can guess who I was going to mention next. Go for it.
Bubba Wallace.
Sure, let's talk about Bubba.
It wasn't Bubba?
He just caught my eye. I don't know if 7,800 seems. I don't know what he was here in the spring. Let's see.
So in the spring, he didn't lead a single lap, which is unfortunate because he actually started P2. Usually, when you start on the front row of Martinsville,
he started P2, finished 4th, and had 31 fast slash. Didn't lead a lap.
Yeah, but he finished 2nd in each of the first 2 stages. He had a 115.8 driver rating.
Yeah.
In this race a year ago, he finished 11th, and then spring 2023, he finished 10th, and then in this race 2 years ago, he started P24 and he finished 8th. Overall, though, this year has been a very good year for Bubba on the flat tracks. Phoenix, not great, but he started P22, finished 16th. Martinsville, he finished 4th. But then, I don't really want to mention North Wilkesboro, but I believe he was the runner-up in the All-Star race.
I think you're right.
New Hampshire wasn't great, but he wrecked. But then he bounced back.
He was, in fact, the runner-up.
But at Richmond, he grabbed a top 5 finish. And I do think that there's this competitive spirit with Bubba. Like, he's happy for his teammate. His teammate is racing for a championship. The team in general has just good aura and energy right now because Tyler Reddick, he's the first driver in 23XI racing history to be racing for a championship. But I think that
I think they just announced the new crew chief for Bubba next year.
I did see that. A truck series guy, right?
I think so. His current crew chief is going to take over like the director of racing at 2311, which is basically, I want to control everything, but don't want to be on the road. Is basically what that means.
So Bubba does stand out to me.
He was basically this price in the spring too.
Yeah, and the thing is with Bubba is like his job is never going to be on the line because he has sponsorships.
Correct.
And so that's obviously going to mean a lot to this team. Not that necessarily Michael Jordan is short on money or he needs it.
Oh, really? He doesn't need the money? He just sold an NBA team for billions of dollars.
But I am intrigued by Bubba Wallace. I think that he has a top 10, but arguably a top 5 finish in for him on Sunday.
I would agree with you there. This whole range is just
wide open
for me. Nobody really stands out. I mean, I do like Bubba on short tracks. He's clicking on them right now, and I want to keep riding that hot hand. But in this price range, I mean, Ross Chastain is decent.
Yeah.
But he also, in the last 3 races, hasn't finished better than 13th here.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's going to qualify around there, which he did the last 2 races, then that hampers his value unless he's racking up fast laps, which, without wall riding, it's harder to do.
I don't mind Buescher strictly from the perspective that like we've seen him qualify pretty bad.
Correct.
Over the last handful of races, and yet we know this is a guy who has top 15 upside. And that's actually, I shouldn't even say upside because like his upside is that he can win the race. He's won a race each for the last 3 years, it seems. But like last week he started P21 and finished 15th at Homestead, which wasn't great because he was 7,700 and he only returned 36 fantasy points on DraftKings. But at Vegas, he started P22 and he finished 10th, which was, good for 48 fantasy points when you mix in some fastest laps. So 7,500, like I think that there are enough laps to go around where he could maybe get off pit cycle and collect maybe 10 to 20 fastest laps and possibly still finish top 10.
To put some numbers behind it, he's finished 15th or better here 4 times in the next gen era. Only one of those was inside the top 10. That was P8 in this race last year. He has started 18th or worse 3 times in the next gen era. Inside the top 10 twice. So he does have a history of starting outside the top 18 and then moving up. Like this year, he started 30th, finished 15th here in the spring. So that's not, you would take that. He also moved up 10 spots in this race last fall. So his driving style tends to do really well at the shorter tracks where he's basically just like, I don't call him this generation's Ryan Newman, but he can be a guy that just puts elbows up and makes himself wide and is hard to pass.
Yeah.
Fords do better here because the aero isn't a factor, right? Like that's a help for them that aero is no longer a factor, so they can just use their driving style to their advantage, which plays decently here. So I would say those two right now are kind of the 3, I guess, are kind of sticking out to me.
Any good value reads on your end?
I think Ryan Preece is in play.
Easy.
Short track. What?
Easy. Yeah, that was going to be my suggestion.
I mean, it's a short track. That's what he's known for. He finished 9th here in the spring. He's finished 20th or better in all 3 cup races he's run here in the next gen era. Now, the downside is he's also qualified inside the top 10 twice here in that span. So there's a little bit of, he finished 15th, but he started on the pole.
If it makes you feel any better. So would you would you weigh those qualifying results heavier than what he's done lately? Because in 4 of the last 5 races coming into Martinsville, he's actually qualified outside the top 30.
It's hard to say because I don't know that team's been clicking all year.
Yeah.
And he had an okay qualifying run here. I mean, he started 22nd here this spring and finished 9th.
Okay.
So if he does that again, certainly in play. If he's starting inside the top 10, I'm a little more concerned. Although at this price point, he can certainly drop back several spots and still not kill your value.
I didn't realize Shane Van Gisbergen was in this field.
Yeah.
He's going to get spanked.
That's a no-go. I mean, he's gonna learn how to drive these sometimes, but it's also
he's getting laps in. That's all it matters. That's all he cares about.
I mean, yeah, it's not ideal to be honest. One guy that is also into the other note about Ryan Preece is that he's led a decent chunk of laps here in those 3 races. He's averaged 45 laps led.
Shut up, really?
It appears so. I don't know if he got all of them in one time when he started on the pole.
Did I miss that? Oh, I think he did.
I think it might have been like 2022, like the first race of 2022.
Yeah, I think he qualified on the pole for one of these. Yeah, 2023 spring with SHR, he got the pole and led 135 laps.
But there you go. So he hasn't led anything other than that, which is not ideal, but
yeah.
Who knows? If he qualifies on the pole, we can get some cheap laps led, although he will be really popular if that happens because the laps led leader for less than 7K is like a free square. I don't know. Hocevar, man, keeps just showing up and driving well.
Yeah, that kid can wheel it. Like, I kind of like that he really hasn't been a problem this year either.
He kind of comes off as a little bit of an ass.
A bit.
But that guy can hold his.
He's been fine this year, though.
Can hold his spots. I mean,
like he's a good driver. If he stays out of his own way, like you're not far off in saying that he's a little bit of an ass.
Yeah.
Okay. The Dodgers tied it up.
Yeah, fantastic.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Shohei's up.
It's whatever. I mean, 8 top 10s for Hocevar is pretty decent. So
he's one of those guys though that like nobody really ever wants to play him because he actually qualifies pretty well though. And what we haven't talked about yet on this podcast is how just because a value play qualifies inside the top 20 does not mean that we have to go away from them. If they can just maintain track position and not lose the lead lap, and if they're still on the lead lap in the top 20 come stage 3, if chaos ensues, they can just chip away and gain some spots, as the race just like unfolds and plays out. And so, Hocevar at 6,700, I say it, but like there's another top 10. I won't say top 10, but top 15 potential for a race like this.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. I mean, he has, man, he's been impressing me, especially for a guy who made a jump and then was in basically a third car for a different team.
Yeah,
it's been pretty impressive. And he did okay here earlier this year. He finished 17th here after starting 25th, which is decent enough. I mean, he's averaging in his 2 races here in the Cup Series, he's averaging 23.4 points. That's not terrible. Yeah. It's not 5x, but it's also not going to kill you. So, I don't know. Other guys down in this range, I really feel like we're gonna have to see what they look like on track.
Yeah, I was kind of interested in Todd Gilliland. I was kind of hoping he would be 5,800 low or upper 5K. He got a $800 price jump, so I don't know how excited I'm going to be playing Gilliland at 6,600. He hasn't been as good as he was earlier in the year, so it's definitely going to be one of those things where we kind of let practice qualifying unfold. Maybe we just find some leverage spots that are starting in the 20s because, again, this is not a track where you necessarily need to play guys that are starting deep in the field. Deep field PD is a bit risky here because drivers can get lapped by lap 30.
Yep.
So not necessarily safe.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, he has run well here the last 2 races. He's finished P10 and P13, but he's also not looking nearly as good down the stretch here as he did earlier this year when he nabbed that P13 here. So I don't know if it's a case of he's fading a little bit or something shifted a little bit in the team, which is weird because he's their guy. He got an extension in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if the beginning of the year he was racing for his career and then he proved it and then he got the money and then he's kind of eased off a little bit. I don't know. But yeah, he is a little bit more of a risk at 6,600 than I would like to admit, given how he's looked coming down the stretch here. I don't know. I don't know what to make of Michael McDowell either. I think his driving style probably fits this track.
And I do subscribe somewhat to the theory that if you're a good road racer, you can handle Martinsville probably better than most. And that's mostly
it's a rhythm track.
Yeah, and the tight turn radius, I feel like that caters better to road course drivers, which does give me some intrigue with SVG. But at the same time, he has no experience at this track, and he's just going to get bullied for track position.
Correct. Yeah. And earlier this year, back in April, McDowell did start 35th and finish 21st with 7 fastest laps for 38 points at the same price tag he's at now. So just because it's one race doesn't mean that he can do it, a second time. And his history here is a little bit checkered. He basically starts and finishes about the same spot. But it doesn't necessarily mean that from any given race he's not capable of moving up like 10 spots.
Any final thoughts as we depart on the second to last podcast of the season?
No, I mean, schedule wise, you mentioned you were working on the other series playbooks already.
Truck Series is done. It'll be published Thursday evening. We're recording this Wednesday night. Truck Playbook will be up Wednesday night, probably before this is even published on the website. And then Xfinity Series will go up Thursday, and I will have updates for both on Friday.
And then Cup practice and qualifying is Saturday. I think it's like lunchtime for me here Central. So I think it's 1 Eastern, I think it starts.
Mm-hmm.
And then the race is Sunday afternoon. I will see how things go. I do have family in town this weekend. So I'm going to try and get stuff done, but also not just sit in front of my computer all day. But it will be out some point Saturday. And then projections Sunday morning and whatnot. So we will see. But yes, second to last race of the 2024 NASCAR season. And then we get the championship race at kind of a dud of a track, unfortunately. Really wish that it goes back to Homestead. Really, really, really wish it goes back to Homestead. Quite frankly, they could swap out all intermediate tracks on the schedule except for Kansas and Homestead, and I'd be fine. Just race at Homestead and Kansas like 8 times a year. It will be good. But yeah, that'll do it for the Martinsville preview. And betting piece will be out Friday as well. I'll have the Cup betting piece out Friday at some point, so you can check that out. I've been hitting 3-4 bets a race the last 3-4 weeks, so I think I had the winner. I had the winner last week. Had a couple of top 10 props. Barely missed on a top 5 in Vegas, which irritated me. Allmendinger finished 6th. But yeah, so check that out. We've been hot coming down the stretch here.
All right, Matt. Well, thank you so much for your time as always. Best of luck to you this weekend with Martinsville, and best of luck to the FA Nation.
Best of luck, FA Nation.